T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Midheaven Podcast, where we drink on the internet for you. Mm-hmm. We're moving on up in the world.
Oh, yeah.
We had a nice month, so we decided to treat ourselves.
Shout out to y'all who's showing love and came through for that last live we did. That was just it was record numbers, I feel.
Yeah,
Really
I feel like the astrology was like quite a hit.
Yeah, and it was fun too. I think we did our thing. Everyone liked their reading. And yeah, I just want to outright claim that I am officially your favorite chocolate man out of...
More? Are you good with that?
Actually, yeah, this is
That's
good.
That's good? Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of chocolate males and men in this world, and I'm just stepping up as your favorite.
I mean, somebody's got to replace R. Kelly.
Mr.
So.
Godiva. Yes, the new chocolate factory.
Does the third man want to come and get this? It's like an elf. If you do this, somebody comes to get it. Oh, it's a trade-off.
Oh, yeah.
There's some Seattle beer for you.
Oh, yeah, that's lit.
I'm such a fucking alcoholic. So I'm at the Seattle airport, and my husband and I are trying to fly home, and we're like, we don't want to pay $15 for a beer. And I was like, oh, let's go to the gift shop and like buy a pack of beer. And he's like, you can't do that. I'm like, you can do that. So I like went into like one of like the gift shop marts or whatever and just bought like a pack of like hot beer. And we just sat
like
there.
Hot as in it wasn't chilled? Like
Yeah.
It wasn't, okay.
Because it was meant to be like taken home as like a gift. And we were like, we're going to drink this while we're waiting in the terminal.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Improvising.
In light of all of this drinking and traveling and summer talk, we thought it would be a good episode to discuss the summer solstice. I think we did this one of the other videos. I think we did this for the winter solstice actually last year.
Yeah.
Where we talked all about that solstice chart, what it tells us really for like the next quarter of the year, taking us into the fall. I'm excited. I was looking at our memories on Facebook and like the pool cast came up.
Okay.
We should do another one of those.
You know what? When you were talking to me about the summer thing, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah?
Like,
Did I just read your mind?
Yeah. I was like, well, it would be
Cleo's
nice to do
Psychic
another kind of
Network.
episode. That was definitely a hit. Y'all got to see me swim. I'm like a myth.
Mike does swim. He does not sink. Believe it or not. Just another reason why you're like a black unicorn.
Actually, I did learn I am a unicorn.
Yeah.
I didn't know. It was amazing. And the fantasy. So technically, I come straight out of
A fantasy for like 40-year-old white ladies.
Yeah, yo, that's
They like that
scary.
chocolate. You hit 40 and you're like, I haven't sampled the dark chocolate. I'll go to the dark side.
Spoke with good grammar. even the white people in my school were shook. Like, damn, you whiter than me on it. Like they look like they were seeing a fantasy creature. And people would just be, I was in high school, like, why do you speak with good grammar? I'm like, I know, I'm sorry.
You're like hooked on phonics, done me good.
I'm sorry, I sound so eloquent. I know, I'm not hood enough. I get it. But in retrospect, now it's Gemini season, and I'm feeling brilliant.
Yeah, as we're filming this, it's Gemini season. So you're like, what is Cancer season? We already did the Cancer season episode, but we didn't have time to talk about the summer solstice chart. And I think a lot of people, they don't really like look at this. Like sometimes I'll see people be like, oh, let's talk about it. I don't know if the astrology podcast does that. I haven't really followed it recently, but I thought it would be really just like a good idea just to give people some insight as to like what to expect over the summer. Certainly there's like lots of really crazy ingresses that are happening with like the Jupiter stuff. It feels like every single time there's like a major shift in Cancer for whatever reason, we see the moon Jupiter. It's all coming back to me. I think we talked about this as like the opening, being like, whoa, that's big energy.
We talked about it last time for sure.
with moon Jupiter square.
The way Cancer starts is a little like how Gemini started, where the moon was with Mars.
Yeah.
So it just seems like the second chapter we're getting a lot deeper into what these ideas established.
Well, it's just pushing some kind of like initiative where Aries and Cancer is in the chart in general. So it's like, I feel like Jupiter is still kind of really strong, saying like, we're going to do this shit. We're going to do this, and it's going to be quick moving, and it's going to be aggressive and exciting and fun. And I think in some sense, it's quite positive for travel.
Just or like going to new places too.
Yeah, and people just being like a little bit more adventurous, people willing to go out and do things on their own, like individuals going out and like kind of like getting active and not feeling like they have to kind of stay in place. So whenever we're looking at like a solstice chart, it's going to talk about what's going to happen for about 3 months. So this is going to take us all the way up to the fall equinox, which is going to be happening the second half of September. What do you have to say about this?
I am eyeing the F out of that Moon-Jupiter conjunction. That's just like starting with a bang.
Well, it's going to start also like in the really early morning hours on the West Coast. So it's going to be technically Cancer season starts June 21st, 2022 to 27 a.m. when the sun enters into 0 degrees of Cancer. Okay. So when the sun's in Cancer, obviously, like at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, especially here in the United States, there's just like a lot of Cancerian things. We're making pies and watching fireworks, and we're hanging out at home, and we're going swimming and all that stuff. But I think it goes a little bit deeper into like really putting an emphasis on the action that we're taking emotionally when it comes to our security, our homes, our family. And I think the Mars energy with, you know, the Moon, Jupiter, Chiron, Mars, all in the sign of Aries, it's squaring by sign is like, I don't know, it feels like very aggressive.
It's very aggressive. And I know to me, it's going to feel like, or the image I get with that fire squaring it is like the boiling water pot that all Cancer season will be just getting hotter. And I like to see Leos as like the Groundhog Day because they are the main characters. So I always like to look at what's happening with Leos. Case in point, the Leo King had some crazy drama in Gemini season. And to me, that's like, okay, Groundhog's Day. Like, we know Leo season's about to be super dramatic. And we know that Cancer season's going to be like the bubbling, spicy.
Well, it's 12th house to Leo, too. So.
Right. You know, a lot of things going to spill over. So I also feel like having Mars in Aries, like, to me, Mars in Aries is like touching a woman's leg or like trying to go make your move. And the Cancer is like, I don't feel like it yet. Like, it's not the right time. Squares are usually clashes. Like, Aries wants it now. Cancer wants to feel right first. And that makes me think about how the purpose of Libra is to enforce the law. Obviously, and so that Aries isn't so selfish, we do things that balance. And Cancer in between there is what feels right for me and you. How do we balance that in integrity with Capricorn? So I love that you're bringing up this solstice. Mercury's going to be in Gemini. This is definitely going to be the open door into the soul of how you feel about yourself. And last year, Cancer season for me, for the first time, I caught myself asking myself what I think about family and like where I come from, my last name. And compared to last year versus now with all this Aries energy, the questions we had last year, I think we now know so much more who we're become and how to identify with
and how to take initiative too.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to me also to see, and I think I said this in the Cancer season episode, just so many planets in their like natal domicile. So like seeing like Saturn in Aquarius, Neptune in Pisces, Mars in Aries, Venus in Taurus, Mercury in Gemini,
Moon in Cancer.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff that's kind of going on. I think just if you look at it from like a natal perspective, like the Sun Moon square, I've always seen it as kind of like this challenge between your emotions and like your actions, or your emotions and your body language. And the Sun deals a lot with like your personal identity and your energy and, you know, what you're willing to kind of like make happen, how you show up in the world. So there's something that's in friction here that's, I think, getting set off by that Aries moon. Aries moons are super combative. So the moon being in Mars sign, it's a chart that's going to be dealing a lot with like the moon. There's a lot going on. I'm watching Mars build into that square with Pluto. Did you hear anything over this last week? I don't know if you've been like watching the news, but supposedly like Biden had to be rushed out of his like beach home or something. Like he's got a home on the East Coast somewhere, because there was a plane that was flying very low overhead, and they had to like do some, like look into it. Like they had to like basically like go with some quick moving method that they had to like get him out of that situation and move him to a more secure location.
I wish that was Trump in that plane. Like, let's troll him.
And then there's stuff that's been coming up saying like there's been all kinds of things going on off the coast of them sending planes after this to like go and look over like coastal like cities like overseas. And I'm not stroking fear. It's not what I'm trying to do. But it makes me feel like, man, the moon Jupiter in a square to the sun is like, where do we feel like we're being under attack? Emotionally, literally,
On our
physically,
own turf,
in our own
too.
home. Yeah, exactly.
That's so good.
Yeah,
That's
like
a
there's
good idea.
there's something about that makes me feel like moon Jupiter is going to be people reacting instinctually and defensively.
Yeah.
And
before they have any details. Information
to defend their home base. Right?
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of the video you sent me about Kavanaugh, where people are just getting influenced off of, you know, what people, I mean, I'm sure that was not because he said it entirely, but like, you know, just that kind of connection, just seeing people more open and willing to commit acts of violence more than before. And
I mean, Mars,
risk
Jupiter,
it all.
Chiron, all being in
yeah, of
Aries
course.
right now, I think.
Memorial Day shootings in Chicago last weekend.
Yeah.
Was just the
Well,
most
it's
ever
just,
been
I mean, if
since-
you've noticed, it's just throughout the news, we're getting bombarded with all of this stuff that's like acts of violence. Almost like creating a narrative that's like,
Not theirs.
oh, we're not safe.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Kind of things that make you go,
And that's the most important thing. How well are you able to see the narratives that are being created? Because there's so many ways you can like speak about what's happening, but you see these power plays being taken to prepare for the Saturn retrograde. But before we go into Cancer, because I clearly see like the first 6 days coming into that square. Can I have some of that?
yeah, you want some lipstick on it too?
I
Sorry,
don't
there you
mind.
go. There you go.
The first 6 days coming into that square is going to be like a huge like boom. But let's talk a little bit about the significance of coming into this Cancer season from Gemini, because Gemini seems like a crazy setup. It's like we're coming up with an idea and then we're taking action in Cancer.
Yeah, but there's a lot more support, or there has been a lot more support in Gemini season. I mean, we had a retrograde, which kind of helped Mercury get its shit together, and it dipped back into Taurus, trine Pluto. It was a lot of strategizing, comes back into Gemini, and it's going to be making sextiles to Jupiter and trines to Saturn. So I feel like even as Mercury is now coming out of shadow, by the time we get to the solstice, it's going to be building into some positive air trines with Saturn. So it's kind of like Saturn's giving a nod to Gemini that it doesn't typically get. And it hasn't gotten over the last couple of years because of the nodal squares, you know?
Yeah.
Gemini, the North Node in Gemini was purely just to teach us that there's two sides to every story.
Yeah.
That there's fact checking, and then there is like flat out complete oversight of everything and like trying to like conceal certain information and details, and like we saw a lot of division. But I think that what I liked about that transit is that it really kind of opened everybody's eyes that there's definitely like a lot of like manipulation going on in terms of like what's coming out in the news or what's coming out in media.
Exactly.
You know?
Basically, there's Johnny Depp and then there's Amber Heard. That's what Mercury taught us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the fact that while that whole trial was going on, there was a whole trial going on that involved Clinton and her attorney, and apparently getting held accountable for creating a false narrative about Russia.
Didn't even know that. Oh, so
Yeah,
she's still getting, wow.
Yeah, like people aren't hearing this shit. That's what's like so crazy to me is like everybody's like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and I'm like, isn't it right about time that they're dropping the early June Pfizer documents? Oh, okay. Of course, there's a shooting and there's like,
I think somebody retweeted her. Hillary, she had posted like no one's ever really had like no one needs a war weapon, or no one's ever had a AR or need for it. And then someone said no one's had like 50 of your friends mysteriously commit suicide or die, or something like that. But, you know, I love that you said that, because, like, these aren't being broadcasted. Like, let's just be completely honest. If it was Trump on trial, we would hear that.
Well, that's coming up, though. Trump is about to be on trial soon for all the stuff that happened in the January 6th situation. Yeah, I mean, it's
Which
like...
is clearly staged.
you know, there was supposedly something that was wiped off YouTube that was like an interview that somebody's kid, like a kid of like a judge did. He did an interview that ended up going out the day of everything that took place. And in the video, you see him like, and it was brought out by, I think it was what was it? The New York Times? The New York Times posted it. You can actually go and find this. It's on the New York Times. You can watch the interview because it's been taken off YouTube.
Wow.
Because YouTube has officially backed Biden now, and they have said that they will support Biden in fact checking. So there are certain things they're looking
YouTube
for
sold it
in videos.
a long time ago.
But he's
Way
doing,
before Biden.
this guy's doing the interview, and you see the guy with the horns behind him.
What?
And you see cops standing around, and everybody's super relaxed, and they're doing this interview. And then the guy was saying, like, it's really weird. There was, like, cop vests and all kinds of things, like, staged all around the Capitol, like cop hats and things that people picked up and obviously were wearing in the images. And they were like, something's off here. And the guy actually went to the demonstration at the Capitol.
The day of, so they didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, and I'm not like dismissing like that it wasn't potentially horrendous and like that people did things that were illegal. I'm more kind of saying like
They were
something
so
about
bad.
something about the narrative is off, and I don't understand how
You have to be an idiot to believe that narrative. Please go ahead. You don't understand how what?
they did the same shit with Black Lives Matter though. Like
No,
they
but-
knew that they were stroking the fires with some of that stuff.
But that's
and-
what I wanted to compare. Like,
Yeah.
January 6th was so heinous. These people did such a bad job. They didn't burn anything down. They didn't loot anything. These are just horrible white people that just, you know, did such a horrible.
There's a bunch of
capitalist
hillbillies
run.
hocked up a Mountain Dew.
Right? Like I
That's-
don't know what was really threatening about that.
I'm convinced everything that's happening right now is just like an orchestrated takedown of the Second Amendment. And I sound like a glorified Republican saying that, and
You
maybe
don't
I
have
am.
to, no,
but
see, this is the most of. I love that you said that. You don't have to be a Republican. You don't have to be a liberal. Like, we don't have to put these labels on it. Like, you can be a liberal. You could be a Republican. You could be Democrat, Republican, and still acknowledge what's happening to the 2A. You know,
it's
what I
just
mean?
weird the way they're creating a narrative, and so
To
I feel
put
like
people against each
there's
other.
more of this coming, and it's like, you know, July in general, it's like this very American time. Like everybody's got their flags out and they're barbecuing and they're eating like fucking apple pie. But I think even more, looking at this chart, it's going to be like really strong emotional reactions to like homeland pride and protection.
Domestic terrorism.
Yeah. Well, apparently now, and this is on the Biden website, I sound like a psychopath right now. You're considered a domestic terrorist if you question the 2020 election.
What?
Yep. And if you question...
Wait, really?
Yep. Yes. And if you question whether or not the way the whole pandemic was handled
Oh, wow.
was appropriate. Like if you question those things, like they're deeming you a domestic terrorist.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am a domestic terrorist. You know, 'cause
Like seriously,
that
you know?
is crazy.
And I'm all for like gun reform and making sure that like you can't buy a rifle or a firearm the same day. Like you should be probably 21 years old because you have to be 21 to drink. You have to be 21 to do other things. Like there are things that they could be doing. But by the same token, like they've put all this other stuff into the legislation saying now the state or the government will deem whether or not you're mentally capable of handling and holding a firearm. So they're not leaving it up to medical professionals. They're leaving it up to the state or to the federal government to deem whether or not you are capable of having that. So if you end up somewhere on social media or publicly, you know, talking about what you do or don't believe in and you get deemed a domestic terrorist, and then somebody just shows up at your door and says like you can't have a gun anymore. I mean,
Well, if civil war breaks out in this country, it's going to be gun control. That's just facts. Like, there are people who are not giving up, and when it comes down to the military having to like shoot and kill people who are defending their rights, I can see some people in the military defecting, and that's going to
a lot of people in the armed forces are leaving, and they have been leaving
go.
in droves. This is a fact.
See, I didn't know that. That's
And
wild.
a lot of them are going to
Shout out to
private force, or they're going to private security or other private sectors that are not associated
Hired by Trump? No,
specifically with the government, because they're like, we don't want to eventually have to go against our own people.
Yeah.
And so this is something I talked about last
year
year during the Venus retrograde in Capricorn, because I was like, this is going to be everybody who wears a uniform.
Yeah.
What did we see? Lots of firemen, police officers, people who work as nurses, all kinds of people who wear uniforms were like, we're not doing this.
And once again, like, many of these people may have opinions that disagree with what I believe.
Yeah.
But it's just on a whole different level, like, you know, really seeing through this BS. And
this whole thing with like Canada, now Canada is like banning the ability to buy or sell handguns. They're freezing the market. And essentially making like a whole statement out of like, you know, what has gone on in America. They're
something that happened like unrelated to them. And so if we look statistically, you know, and not to make this all about gun control, but it's important to talk about this because this is a precedent with Saturn retrograde where legislation is being created. By the time Saturn goes direct in Libra, they're going to enforce it. So, you know,
it's going to be because of the events that take place over the summer.
Exactly.
Basically, yeah.
Exactly, which obviously have been prepared, you know, and planned. I love that you said that. So, factually speaking, and someone from PragerU said this, or I saw this from a video, but basically, statistically speaking, Americans have had guns since like before the 70s. Like Americans have had guns, and there have been no school shootings.
It didn't relate to the 90s.
Right.
It was an uptick in the 90s, yeah.
Guns aren't the problem then, clearly, because we've had guns.
Well,
so it hasn't been until recently. So
I think it's weird that they're trying to hold gun manufacturers liable.
Right.
It's like we're not holding fast food companies liable for producing obesity or heart attacks, right? So it's like it could go either way.
We're not holding record labels liable for RICO cases that rappers get into because of lyrics that allude to gang violence, you know. So
I just have this really strange feeling that it's going to materialize very shortly. It'll be like within 48 hours when the moon moves to square Pluto that we're going to start seeing the intensity, and then within a matter of days we see, you know, Mars come into the square with Pluto. Like there's some pretty heavy transits that are going to be coming July going into August. Like you guys already know this. We talked about this a little bit, but I don't know, something about this makes me feel like also it's going to have to deal with like airplanes because the moon Jupiter conjunction. So it can be about like individuals' rights to fly, travel, because the moon's at like a document degree and Jupiter's like at a Virgo degree. So it's like health and travel maybe in the square to the sun, like who can or cannot come to the United States. Who can't come into the United States, right? Who can travel here, or what are the requirements if you leave, or I don't know.
Honestly, one thing you said that's very clear is what is not being broadcasted, because there's so much that's happening that like everyone's focused on what's being presented, what's like happening under the radar, and I feel like this Cancer season inadvertently is going to reveal all that.
Well, I mean, mainstream media is dying, right?
This is the truth.
It's dying. Like they're losing. Ratings are going down. That's why they throw whatever they can at the wall to see what sticks. But also, they are now doing everything possible to try to partner with government organizations because they know that they're going to get funding, right?
That's what you showed
yeah.
me. Yeah.
And they're trying to like make it difficult to become a recognized independent like reporter. Like the free press is meant to be free, and they're essentially in so many ways trying to say, well, we want to regulate the free press.
Shout out to James O'Keefe, because he was mentioning that too, like bringing transparency back to journalism.
Well, and it's all being held in, you know, it's up to individuals, and it's kind of hard because a lot of these independent people, individuals, Aries, are trying to do this.
James O'Keefe is an Aries.
But they're being either censored or like shadow banned, blacklisted. Like there's lots of things going on that's not really allowing them to do that. And they have very little resources. Like they're turning to YouTube because that's where the audience is, but they're trying to build a base like through email subscription, or they're trying to go to Rumble, or they're trying to go to BitChute. And like Rumble and BitChute gets kind of like a bad rap. Like there's some crazy shit on there for sure. But I think it's interesting that so many of them are like, look, I wouldn't have to be on YouTube if I was getting paid. This is where I'm getting paid, but eventually I'm going to make the jump. Like, it's just a matter of time before I think we start to see people who continue to stick it out and find ways to be courageous and share what's going on in the world.
Exactly.
Information, because Jupiter's truth, right?
And it is happening too. It's just, how do we find it? Is it getting censored?
You have to look for it.
Exactly.
You have to look for it, and
Yeah.
I think that you also have to be careful and you have to be cautious with like whose advice you're buying into. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you want to...
Even people who say what you want to hear, like, hold them to that same standard of people who say what you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Because Neptune's still in Pisces, and there's a lot of conjecture, postulation, and it could all just be so distracting. But I think one thing that you keyed into very powerfully, which I don't think we should overlook, is that inevitable timing of things kind of combusting and things being revealed, and people just, because we're gonna have that reality check where people realize what it is.
Yeah.
And it's gonna keep happening. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that looks like it might be the Uranus North Node conjunction.
Yeah, I mean, I've been like screaming from the rooftops basically since December. I'm like, okay, guys, you heard me talking about 2020 extensively in 2018.
Yeah.
Since the end of last year, I've been like, hi, July, August of 2022. Like, that's the jump off. And by then, because everything is going to be conjunct in Leo, opposed Saturn, square the nodes, the fate is set. Something will change that there's no going back from, basically.
And Leo season is the red carpet debut of a new movie, or you know, the main characters are going to have their birthday. I love that you brought that up. Especially, my next question to you is, we start Cancer season with Mercury trine. Oh, that's Venus. Never mind.
Venus trine Pluto.
Yeah. What do you think about Venus trine Pluto, though?
I think I'm very fascinated by that 27, 28 degrees of Taurus. Like, I notice patterns. That's just me. But
28 is Algol, right?
you know, yeah, that's Algol. That's where we had an eclipse in November of 2021. That's the opposition point of the eclipse that we just had in Scorpio. That's Mercury's retrograde path. It's bringing this up for some reason. And the latest degrees of Taurus relate specifically to Saturn in terms of like Decan, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the Saturn decan.
So, you know, it's about solidifying, it's about cementing, committing. And when you take Saturn and Venus, it's like long-term planning.
Mm-hmm.
And it can deal with wealth. Venus trine Pluto for sure. It's,
Whoa, word.
It's
Okay.
very passionate and very...
That's been coming up with my cards too. A lot of wealth for everybody.
I think just the fact that the North Node is in Taurus, and you've got Venus trine Pluto, and you've also got Mars that is, you know, starting to build into a sextile with Saturn is positive.
So,
I think you see support on both sides.
Yeah, positive for sure. The vision I got right now is like new financial breakthrough. So like by Leo season, there may be like a new way that we may be on the verge of like hundreds of thousands of people being able to enter a new tax bracket. And Leo season is where it will be open, but Cancer season may be where the gold rush first finders get into it first before it becomes oversaturated.
Tax bracket is interesting, just considering that Leo is going to move to square the nodes and oppose Saturn.
Post Saturn, yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically
Regulation,
saying,
yeah.
like, you know, that's also, I think, going to deal with like a lot of like creatives, a lot of artists, a lot of performers, a lot of younger people who are like, you know, kind of standing up and pushing for things. I don't know.
Which is key that you mention artists, because 2022 is iconic in that this is the first year post 2020, 2021 where we don't have the restrictions we had. So it's like art will finally be able to, like, before they restrict it again, hopefully not.
No, I think we will see that again, because
I
you're
really
going to
do
see
think so,
planets
yeah.
move to oppose Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to see all those planets oppose Saturn.
We spoke on this last year,
Yeah.
where coming out into the socials activates that restriction. It's like the social environment clapping back at the collective mandates. So I think this year we're going to see with Aries people rebelling against this. Whereas last year, it's like, how do we feel about this? It was still in Pisces. We didn't have all the information. Now Virgo season is going to reveal everything. And it's going to start with Cancer season. So this is the Cancer, Leo, Virgo, 1, 2, 3, boom, 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 that will really kick things off. I really think if we go back to that square, the beginning of Cancer season is going to be a bang. I really would not be surprised if some element of nuclear warfare breaks out. And I don't know if this is related, but I haven't been following the news. Is Ukraine still being invaded?
I mean, to an extent, there's talk right now that Russia is basically working with China. Yeah, surprise, right? No big surprise there.
What's good?
And then there was
what's good?
And then there was all this shit that came out where they were saying like, Putin was essentially protecting the borders because there was all these biolabs that were in Ukraine.
Right. This is a fact.
And Russia came out and accused the U.S. of like cooking up some stuff that was gonna.
What a conspiracy theorist. Like, what else are you gonna call them? According to
I'm not
Biden's
saying
website,
Putin's a
they're
good
terrorists.
man. Trust me, I have friends who are from like Eastern Europe and stuff, and like I don't think there is any good guys anymore. I just think it's like who can like monopolize on what new crisis is happening to try to like take power. I mean, I don't know. I have this feeling.
It's highly revealing that they would accuse them of that.
I'm not taking away from the Ukraine thing, but it was like, to me, it was like no different than the Black Lives Matter. It was like, let's get everybody worked up and let's
it was the same thing.
Launder millions of dollars into something.
Remember Coney?
And yeah.
Back in the day,
yeah.
They've been recycling that same formula for years. It's crazy.
It just, eat it up. I can't understand why we can't feed people and help people here, but we can send all of this money to Ukraine unless we were trying to either cover something up or
it's not like our president actually had like money and deals that his son gained from Ukraine. Oh,
you mean the laptop?
Damn it, never mind. It is. But I don't want to be a terrorist.
I mean, all I'm going to say is this. It's like there's going to be some shit that's going to come up this summer that's definitely going to stroke the flames in a way and get a lot of, because the moon can be the general public, like reactionary and responding to things and kind of like jumping other people's shit. That's the feeling that I'm getting.
And we really need to accept that everything we go through this summer is based off the precedent established since March and Aries season. Because this is an integration of those first 3 months, right? So one thing Candace has said, or listening to Candace has just made me really more focused coming into the summer that be very mindful of what, like we've been trained through this, like be very mindful of what you're being presented by the mainstream. I think they're going to go overtime here.
I think the transit of Jupiter through Aries, whether it's conjunct the moon, whether it's conjunct Mars, whatever, I don't care. It's about personal integrity and personal beliefs. Point blank. And when enough people start waking up going like, this is wrong. It may not affect me, but it affects, the people in my community. It affects the people in my state. It affects people in the street. And if we get enough people who are thinking about others, and that's also Saturn in the background, we're going to realize like we can do so much more collectively than we do when we're arguing and fighting and we see like a lot of division. And I'm not saying this to like scare people, but this is super explosive. When you have planets in Aries in the first couple degrees of Aries, it's pure Mars energy.
It is.
So like Moon Jupiter is going to be like people in their front porch, going at it with people arguing about politics and war. The school shootings
happened when the Mars entered Aries, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boston Marathon bombings, that's just textbook.
Yeah.
And, aligning with that.
What about the Jupiter square the sun? Do you not see that as like...
No, that's
very saying, explosive too. That's overdoing it.
And that's like the first 6 days of the transit too.
Yeah.
So it's like a lead up, and I think that can actually lead to explosions and maybe a domestic terroristic explosion. See, and once again, I don't want to say that to fear anybody.
Well, the North Node Uranus is that.
Right.
That's what it is.
Actually, that is what it is.
That's what it is. But it's in Taurus, so it's going to be somebody who goes and wipes out crops. It's going to be some biochemical
chickens
shit.
That are dying.
It's all of the stuff that you're hearing about.
Might be in the market, right?
Food.
There could be like a financial crash.
Yeah, but I feel like 18 degrees is diabolical degree, all right?
Ooh.
So the fact that it's going to happen at 18 degrees with Mars is literally going...
With Mars?
Yeah, it'll be with Mars. We did this already. We did
I forgot that.
Mars.
Oh, it's a wrap.
I mean...
yeah, it's going down.
Let me just say,
real.
Mars can be a lot of things. Mars can be explosives.
Yeah.
Mars can be guns. Mars can be war. Mars can be needles.
And if it's not like a boom physical, it's going to be economic.
No, it's going to be
like
something that's
material.
shocking that comes out.
Right.
And it's going to disrupt our health or our food distribution. It's going to be something that wipes out crops. It's going to be huge.
It could be a culmination of all that's been happening.
Have you been hearing about all like the food processing centers that are
recently,
catching
like,
fire?
Chicken. I heard like a couple days ago, some like 17,000.
That was in the UK.
That was in the UK.
There was one here, but there was one in the UK.
The chickens was the UK.
Yeah, where
Wow.
like it was a lot of chickens that went up in flames or whatever.
Why?
Super sad, obviously,
weird.
but like, I mean, it's just unusual, and they're
Right.
making it normal. Like when you read the news, it's like this caught fire and that caught fire, and then
just
we're out
like
of
the
this.
school
and,
shootings that are just happening, or just shootings and mass shootings that are happening in different communities that never happens like that ever. But it's weird because you can justify that like, well, it's Aries energy, right? And it can happen like that. But there's the Saturn in Aquarius that knows how to like spin the narrative around it. I'm not going to say orchestrate and stage it.
But Mars
spin
is
the narrative around
semi-sextile Neptune. And like, call me a conspiracy theorist, but like a lot of this shit was planned when we had the stellium in Pisces in February and March. They knew this stuff was going to go on. It's just weird, you know, and it's sad. It's really sad because people do die. People do get hurt. And like, you know, you got people's kids out there that are already afraid to go out into the world because they grew up in a pandemic, but now they have to be worried about going to school. I mean...
And that's that fear narrative. Because do they have to be worried about going to school? Realistically, no. But that's the narrative that's being pushed out there. If they didn't see that...
Well, to give them more control on a federal level to be determining, you know, how...
Realistically speaking, there's so many kids right now that are not dying. Like people don't report that. Like, people were safe today. They're having to drive this narrative, and it's just such an insult. And the reason why it's important to talk about narratives is Saturn in Aquarius, and this is Cancer season, bringing in that initial Saturn retrograde transit, which I love that you brought up the semi-sextile, because that is literally the hidden planning of the narrative.
And it's sextiling Pluto.
It's literally that.
And it's still sextiling Pluto. So a lot of this shit is not really genuinely going to be unveiled until Saturn and Neptune enter into Aries.
That's a
then
fact.
It's new, but Saturn's still going to go into Pisces. It's still going to conjunct Neptune. We've got 2 or 3 more years of falsified media and more pandemics and other things. It's just like, it sounds doom and gloom, but the reality is the beauty, I think.
Sowing the seeds for revolution.
It is the moon conjunct Jupiter, and it's sextile Mercury. It's saying, go out and talk to people, have conversations, get to know your neighbors, don't be afraid of people, like organize locally and trade locally.
During Gemini season, I met 2 neighbors. I've been living in my apartment for a year, and it wasn't until Gemini season that 2 neighbors just randomly hit me up to talk to me.
Oh, there you go.
It's so interesting.
We have neighbors that have been kind of like going in and out next door. There's like randomly, I don't know, it's like always people coming in and out, but one popped out and like came and said hi to my husband. She was like, hi, I've been here for a couple years.
This Gemini season?
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
And I was like, get back in your house. Don't talk to my husband.
I love it. See, this is why I need a Scorpio wifey, man. This is why.
It was like, yeah, she said she's been here for 3 years. I was like, why is she telling you this now? What does she want?
Who's that bitch? Go tell her to go away.
Because if you're divorced
Yes.
and you're 40, of course you're going to be looking around the hood being like, what new trade is next door? Get the fuck out of here.
I'm looking for some married men. So this is interesting too, because like personally, I love like it's very important. You know, it's important for us to say the reality of what we at least believe is happening. But as crazy, and that's one thing I really love. Like, this is the revolution of the individual. So as crazy as things are happening outside of you, you'll find that your personal life is evolving. It's getting better. You're thriving. But now the news narratives around you want you to fear. That's what I noticed. Like 2020 was such a horrible year, but it was one of the best years for me. 2021 was very challenging. It was very challenging for other people, but most of those other people gave in to narratives and, you know, that fear versus other people who just Uranus and Taurus it, paved their own way. We all came up, you know what I mean? So I think it's interesting to note the turning point in Cancer season, because this is a 6-month journey up the mountain to Capricorn. And the next thing I really want to talk about, which we can
it's the bottom. I didn't really think about it like that. It's the bottom. Right. It's like the reflecting on where you're going. Exactly.
We equal out in Libra, but like I consider this series a boss battle series. And ever since 2008, every time the sun squares and opposes Pluto, it's a boss battle. And so this is the very last boss battle we'll have, because then
it'll move into Aquarius.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is the final showdown, I believe.
Well, and it's bringing up Cancerian and Capricorn themes, you know, our home, our roots, our family, our emotional security versus, you know, who governs the world and tells us what we can and cannot do. Leaning more into the Aries and the Gemini part of your chart is important, especially considering now Mercury is coming out of shadow, even though the sun is saying like, okay, are your emotional reactions in alignment with your beliefs, right? So actions and feelings, they need to resonate, like they need to kind of find the middle ground. And I'm still looking at this being like, there's a lot of juice in the Aries and Gemini area that's just like, if you're feeling fearful, you need to be courageous. You need to be willing to do new things, move new places, talk to new people, be optimistic about what you're initiating and what you're sharing, you know?
Especially what you're sharing, because there's still going to be so much opposition. And I feel like, unlike before, this is going to open the opportunity for people to really hear each other out and really bridge differences, because that's the main lesson of the past 2 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, people who are pro-vax or against vax share more in common than it seems. And I think this might be an opportunity for people to dissolve a lot of the differences with BLM, with the elections, with the pandemic, that were specifically engineered as talking pieces to keep people separate. So,
and also get people really territorial. Cancer can be very territorial. So I think with that square, you're going to see a lot of people who are going to be like, get off my land.
Yeah.
You know, you're not welcome here. Or people who are just like also spewing a lot of hate speech because they're so very American that you're going to see a really ugly side of some stuff as well, at least here in the States, you know?
No, that's real. But, you know, you may see this in other places too, just in different ways. But yeah, I love that you said territorialism and holding that down.
Well, and the cardinal signs, like, hold on to your shorts. Especially if you have like a cardinal sun, moon, or rising within like the first 5 degrees. Fuck.
Jesus. What do you feel about Lilith there, though?
Well, the new moon in Cancer is going to have a conjunction to Lilith.
Oh my God, that's great.
So I'm hoping that's like a rise of the witches. You know, maybe the witches will save us. Lilith can be fear too, you know? So it's like the fear of, are we safe? Can I keep my home? Are the kids going to be okay? Like angry mothers, like that's going to be a thing, unfortunately.
Square Chiron a little bit.
Yeah.
16 degrees. I mean, I could see Rise of the Witches. We have to keep in mind Mercury is semi-sextile, so a lot of our processing of what is happening is going to be private. We're not communicating it. We're still integrating it, you know. So many of you will have the answer before you even know you have the answer. And don't be scared. Don't be afraid to communicate that, feeling like you need more details, because we're not going to get any facts until Virgo season, September. Just like, and that's what I love. We called it last year.
Yeah.
We're like, Virgo season, the facts are going to come out, and that's exactly what happened.
Yep.
So it's going to happen like at the final level here. And
well, by the time more of the facts are coming out, a lot of things are going to be skewed this fall.
That's so true.
That's the thing, because we're going to see some pretty heavy squares to Neptune this fall between retrograde Mercury in Virgo and Mars retrograde in Gemini. They will all square Neptune, which is enacting a pretty gnarly mutable square in America's chart.
To me, that looks like war.
I mean,
looks like the seeds of civil war and revolution.
But I think that I said this when all the planets were conjunct in Pisces, especially like Mars and Neptune. I was like, it's already happening. We just don't. They're not telling us.
We just don't know. Yeah, I truly believe that. Yeah.
I read an article this morning that was talking about how they're doing drills. I don't know where it is, but they were like, yeah, and they like let people know, like civilians in the area, like not to be alarmed that they're doing drills with a Chinese plane, but that the American like Air Force or whatever, like they're like, no, like we have the plane, we're doing drills with the plane. Like for somebody who's like a airplane enthusiast or like a vet or whatever, like can you imagine like seeing like a Chinese plane and being like, what the fuck is going on? Like,
right.
Why would they need to be doing that?
Why would they need to be doing a Chinese, right? I mean, that's so interesting. And no, I want to maintain that it is happening. Like, I feel like Neptune coming into Aries is, you're seeing what has been happening since 2012, but the veil is finally released. And it's like, have you prepared? Did you see through it?
Yeah.
Or are you going to be just like, oh shit, I'm in the battlefield, and you believe the narrative, you know?
Well, and a lot of this sounds like doom and gloom, but you know, I mean, I guess the positive side of this is that when you have squares in the cardinal signs, it does force you to act. Mm-hmm. So there is a need wherever Aries is in your chart to take some instinctual steps forward and be like, no, I have to do this. I know this is what I need to do to grow.
Before you even know where you're going, you just gotta move forward.
And then you have to look at where the sun is in Cancer. I'm like shaking in my boots because all of my 4 angles are at 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. And it wasn't until I just looked at this that I was like, oh boy, the end of June
going down.
That's going to be colorful.
Oh, yeah. Because Cancer is going to be like Aries, Taurus, Gemini was like the setup. It's like, I'm going to do this, and now we're moving forward with it, Cancer. So Cancer really is the true start. And this is where personally, you know, you have to really hold deep to your convictions, because that collective opposition will make you feel dumb for standing on your own beliefs, spinning stuff. And, you know, everything that sounds doom and gloom is the direction you want to go to, because the spin is to make you fear it, but that's actually the direction towards your liberation and freedom.
Jupiter is sextile Pluto, so is the moon. Definitely. So, you know, I think that there is big things that are changing, and it's like you can get ahead of the curve and be courageous and make the changes and like leap into things, and practice a sense of I don't know, like adventure that maybe a lot of us haven't had. Like this is the summer to go out and travel, to do things, to go and, because we don't know what it's going to look like in the fall. By the time we get into Libra season, when we start to see all the oppositions and Jupiter returns back to Pisces, I do think you're going to hear a lot of stuff about, well, whether or not we can be going places, well, this, well, that. Like the bright side is that it looks like it's a summer where people can travel, and you've got a lot of planets that are in their ruling sign that's going to give them a lot of power if you just let them do what they're here to do.
That to me looks like a meeting of the planets, and they all came home, and it's resetting everything. But what do you feel about this? I feel like now that we have all this individual Aries energy, and like people have seen what it is for the last 2 years, I feel like we're going to see blowback to the mandates. I feel like they're going to try and do it, but a lot more people are going to be like, no, fuck that.
A lot of people are going to say, no, fuck that, but you have to understand that you are also... the Pluto square, but I'm thinking more about the fact that all of the oppositions in Leo season to Saturn square North Node Uranus is going to be
anti-rhetoric for sure,
making decisions in regards to centralized banking, where they are putting people in a position of being like, you have to do this. You have to get this digital wallet. You have to abide by these tax regulations, and putting people in a corner telling them that, you know, they need to go along with the plan, when in reality, it's going to challenge their ability to have control over their finances, control over their food, control over their bodies. So if you guys thought, you know, 2020 and 2021 with being like, oh, you can't go out to eat without a card, or, oh, you know, you can't work unless you have, you know, proof of a V, the next wave is going to be like, you can't order a pizza.
Jesus.
You can't, you know, buy food within so many, you know, miles outside of your house. You can't travel because you've already burned up your carbon credits. Like, it's gonna be things like that.
It's like a slippery slope.
Yeah. So Taurus really talks about like getting back down to basics, you know, doing things naturally. and I've been saying this for the last year, like either doing local trade, knowing where your food is coming from, you know, buying locally, growing things, like finding ways to be more independent. So if and when this inevitably does happen, you're not feeling the pressure to have to abide by the new regulations.
Which is the purpose of Taurus. All these things that she mentioned takes time. Yeah. And Taurus is the slowest zodiac sign. So take your time and focus and do what you're guided to do, because it's not, and once again, it's less about waiting for shit to hit the fan and worrying, and more about taking back control in your own hands. This is a revolution of the individual. So it's all about balance. You can be mainstream, but you can also innovate what you do personally, and it's going to pay off so well before Uranus goes to Gemini.
And even though it's the summer solstice and sun's in Cancer, take into consideration the Earth is in Capricorn.
Right.
Right? So we are physically experiencing, right, the need to get grounded, get practical, plan, be strategic, that kinds of stuff.
Decide.
And yeah, let us know. Is this happening anywhere significant in your chart? Do you have 0 degrees Cancer rising anywhere? How are you feeling as a cardinal sign if you have like the early degrees for the sun, moon, and rising? Right. Obviously, do you, boo. If you got to go on a cruise, you got to travel, fly somewhere, you got to go live your life, like live it up, because I don't know, come September, I don't feel like we're going to have this like sense of freedom that we have with this.
I hope it's not short-lived, but like Aries activated your identity, Taurus activated the value, got the material, Gemini activated the thoughts, and Cancer to me is the fuel.
Yeah.
It's what's going to fuel this vehicle. It's how you feel. And one thing that you're going to really feel so powerful about doing is joining level 3 on the membership.
I was waiting for it. I'm like, where's the sales pitch?
Or level 1, you know what I'm saying? So I hope you do. And whether you do or not, I hope that whatever it is you do feel, the most important thing with that opposition and King Kunks is you are going to be confronted. Like what you feel about yourself individually is going to be unpopular relative to the narrative. And the test is, are you going to back down like a little bitch, or are you going to break through like a revolutionary? You don't have to kill anybody. You don't have to throw stones. You don't have to loot anything. You just have to stand up for yourself. And so we'll see you on the other side. And congratulations in advance.
All right, guys. We'll see you all very soon. Thanks for joining us. Take care.